The shock factor. We have witnessed the economic ruin of the Rust Belt. We have documented the chemical warfare of Trank on the streets of Kensington. Now, we confront the ultimate failure of American urban policy, the contradiction. This is Skid Row, Los Angeles, an area the size of 50 city blocks, officially designated for homelessness. It is a humanitarian disaster zone where immense, unimaginable wealth is measured in feet from tents, disease, and despair. This isn't just a crisis of addiction, it's a crisis of policy, economics, and moral indifference. The systemic question. Skid Row did not appear by chance. It is the direct consequence of the LA model, a deliberate, decades-long strategy of containment designed to keep poverty out of sight and preserve the city's real estate value. The question is not how these people ended up here. The real question is, why does a city with more millionaires than almost anywhere else in the world actively choose to maintain a permanent, contained zone of human suffering? This is the uncomfortable truth of the West Coast. The legalization of poverty and the West Coast mirror. We exit the economic ruins of the Rust Belt and the fentanyl devastation of Kensington, only to confront the West Coast's most glaring monument to systemic failure, Skid Row, Los Angeles. This isn't a hidden wound. It is an intentionally demarcated 50-block grid in downtown LA where human misery is officially contained and poverty is visually legalized. Here, the sheer scale of the humanitarian disaster dwarfs almost anything else in the developed world. We are talking about thousands of individuals surviving in makeshift tents, their existence a direct confrontation to the city's self-proclaimed status as a global epicenter of technology and culture. This is the uncomfortable truth of immense wealth, existing block by block with profound structural abandonment. The intentionality of policy and the contradiction of wealth. Skid Row did not happen by accident. It is the ultimate consequence of the LA model, a deliberate historical strategy of containment enforced by the Los Angeles Police Department and city zoning. For decades, policies actively pushed homeless populations into this specific centralized district, effectively making it a dumping ground for the unwanted. This moral failure serves a crucial function for the rest of the city, preserving property values and maintaining a sanitized public image for the luxury real estate developers whose glass towers loom just blocks away. The juxtaposition here is a devastating economic commentary. Five-star restaurants and million-dollar lofts stand in the shadow of disease-ridden tent cities. The sheer financial indifference highlights the core of the crisis, a lack of political will to invest in supportive housing, preferring instead to manage the poverty rather than cure it. This is the foundation of the West Coast's shame. The zoning trap and failed initiatives. The persistence of Skid Row is locked in by policy mechanisms. Restrictive zoning laws and bureaucratic hurdles have systematically blocked the construction of new, low-income and multi-unit housing near wealthy areas, pushing the poorest into the core containment zone. We are seeing the failure of multi-billion-dollar municipal bonds like Proposition HHH, which were intended to fund permanent supportive housing. Yet administrative delays, inflated construction costs, and localized resistance, NIMBYism, not in my backyard, mean that promised units materialize at a glacial pace, often costing upwards of $600,000 per unit. This systemic bottleneck ensures that the rate of new homelessness driven by stagnant wages and massive rent hikes always outpaces the rate of supportive housing construction. The moral imperative of housing first versus sweeps. The primary ideological battle defining this crisis is between the housing first model and the punitive containment sweep model. Housing first advocates for providing stable, permanent shelter unconditionally, arguing it is the necessary foundation for treating addiction and mental illness. The reality on the streets, however, is aggressive policing that focuses on periodic sweeps, clearing encampments, confiscating property, and issuing citations for minor offenses like sidewalk obstruction. This approach is not only inhumane, but economically absurd. It costs significantly more to cycle a homeless person through the police, jail, and emergency room systems than it does to provide them with a stable apartment and support services. The failure to adopt housing first is a financial drain, designed to maintain order rather than restore human dignity. But crisis of forgotten diseases. Skid Row's conditions make it a massive public health biohazard. The sheer concentration of human waste, garbage, and biofluids, combined with the catastrophic lack of basic sanitation and hygiene services like public restrooms and shower facilities, creates the perfect vector for diseases that should be historical footnotes in the US. We are seeing outbreaks of Hepatitis A, Typhus, and even drug-resistant staph infections, MRSA. These are diseases of poverty and unsanitary living, directly attributable to the deliberate policy choice of containment, the medical system overwhelmed, and the addiction factor. The burden on county medical centers is immense. The local hospitals are effectively subsidizing the failure of housing policy, spending millions treating chronic wounds, mental health decompensation, and severe addiction cases that cycle back to the street hours after discharge. This medical futility is compounded by the drug cocktail of the West Coast methamphetamine, fentanyl, and increasing amounts of xylazine, creating a unique blend of psychosis and severe sedation. The constant battle against addiction is futile when the patient is discharged back into a toxic, unsanitary, and unsupportive environment. Without the safe foundation of housing, any medical intervention is temporary, ensuring the continued bleeding of public funds into a cycle of crisis management. The criminalization trap and the police function. The law enforcement apparatus in Skid Row functions primarily as a poverty management tool. The police are forced to uphold ordinances that effectively criminalize the act of being homeless, sleeping in public, loitering, and blocking sidewalks. This process of criminalizing existence is the final institutional barrier. It shunts the mentally ill and the addicted directly into the massive county jail system, which has become the largest mental health facility in the nation. This revolving door system ensures that individuals accumulate criminal records, making it virtually impossible for them to secure legitimate employment, stable rental agreements, or governmental assistance upon release. A permanent underclass and ethical indifference. Skid Row is the most visible outcome of a society's willingness to create and maintain a permanent, marginalized underclass. It is a geographically isolated zone of poverty designed to prevent the affluent parts of LA from having to confront the failures of their own economic system. The indifference shown to this humanitarian crisis is not passive, it is an active political choice. The system is prioritizing the maintenance of property values and the preservation of a sanitized city image over the fundamental right to human dignity and shelter. The comfortable truth for the rest of Los Angeles is that as long as the problem remains contained to this 50-block area, the political pressure to genuinely solve it will remain low. The housing first imperative and political will. Reversing the Skid Row disaster requires nothing less than abandoning the containment model entirely and fully embracing the housing first imperative, providing stable, permanent housing unconditionally. This is not simply a humanitarian choice. It is the most fiscally responsible solution. Studies consistently show that the cost of providing permanent supportive housing is significantly lower than the immense public expense of cycling individuals through the emergency room, jail, and policing systems. The barrier is not money, but political will. We need systemic reform to dismantle the restrictive zoning laws that favor luxury developers and reallocate public funds currently wasted on punitive policing to scalable housing solutions. The ethical challenge and final CTA. The challenge of Skid Row is not a logistical problem, but a profound moral and ethical one. We must decide if the dignity of the human person, the fundamental right to shelter and sanitation, is worth more than the preservation of luxury property values and a comfortable public image. The crisis on the streets of LA is a final warning. A wealthy nation cannot indefinitely sustain a contained humanitarian disaster in its heart. Share this documentary to confront the uncomfortable truth about America's failed housing policy. Subscribe to America's Uncomfortable Truth as we continue to investigate the systemic crises that others turn away from.